Systems. How can we make structural changes to existing frameworks to better support students with disabilities on their road to success? Now that we've shifted mindsets and built appropriate knowledge, we're ready to build an effective holistic system to bridge the deep ravine of opportunity gaps. The final component to building student success systems are systems-level integrations and collaboration. To build an effective and strong support system, we must look at feasibility, context, purposeful resource allocation, data-based decision-making, transition and timeline, missed or over-identification, and trusted relationships. Feasibility.
If our process is active, we would have implemented those multi-tiered system of support processes early on. That tiered system looks at all students and is a support for all students, not for the identification of that student. The early warning system serves as a means to assist with the data and to help project and streamline out. I think it's essential that we look at that integration at high school level, but I also think that that integration of an early warning system is crucial with the multi-tiered system of support at middle school level. And that tiered system should help drive what resources that student does or doesn't need, what happens with that student as they're being included or when they're being separated for specialized services. And it also enables us to be able to look at whether or not that student needs more intense services. So the tiered system allows us to be able to shift things forward throughout that student's career if need be, even if they have not been identified prior to high school.
We need to start thinking about things that are feasible, that can be implemented with a high degree of collective efficacy. Tiered systems of supports, I think, really offer this opportunity for us to align and leverage the multiple systems that exist within our schools. When we have competing systems, what happens is we ultimately reduce the effectiveness of each of those systems. So I think it's really trying to look at a single system that allows us to collectively impact students' success within that system. I think over the last 20 years or so, we've created systems that are maybe a little more complex than they need to be. And that complexity leads to frustration, challenges in teachers meeting the sort of requirements that they're meant to do within that system. And if we can think more strategically or intentionally about designing the system, which allows teachers to have more time to provide the instruction that they're obligated to provide, to build relationships with students, which we know is really critical for post-school success, then we're going to allow teachers to increase their overall collective efficacy.
It's important to integrate into their existing systems. Many schools do have some type of comprehensive system of support, whether that's behavior, whether that's academics. Some high schools, high school leaders that I've talked to, they don't have any systems in place. And so then it's really necessary to kind of help them build that.
Context.
I think that we lose the ability to hear or listen to the student voice when they tell us what it is that they need, and we rely more heavily on the data, which it has its value, but sometimes the data doesn't tell the whole picture, or we extrapolate it in a way that gives us the idea that this is the issue over here, and it may be an issue, but it might not be the root cause.
What more needs to be talked about is maybe what life looks like outside of school. The way a student behaves or whether a student acts always has a consequence. You know, I was always raised that every action has a reaction. So I feel like we need to look at what's going on in the student's life and not maybe label them as being a bad student. We need to maybe ask the questions are what's going on in your home life, or what's going on, or maybe if you're not understanding what you're reading and you're getting frustrated with the text, and maybe that just kind of, you know, upsets everything, and it'll be like the straw that breaks the camel's back. So I feel like we need to look at some of those things and include that with everything else, include that with your learning disability, if you're getting your accommodations, if your teachers are being a community to you, you know, if you have a community at home, just look at everything from a holistic standpoint.
Purposeful resource allocation.
The biggest improvement will be to get more people involved. Here in the city, we have interventionists, we have SPED teams. Most of those people are doing dual roles. With more funding or more resources in individual school buildings, you have people that specialize in different things, and they can give students the access to the material or the education that they need to make them feel more successful, and in turn raise those graduation rates. A failure in one area breeds failure in others, and then that feeling alone builds upon the dropout rates or percentages.
Data-based decision making.
I think creating a system is the first step, but then I think giving administrators and educators the tools on how to change things in real time as a result of that data is going to be very critical. And so we can collect all the data we want. We have a lot of it right now telling us that our schools are not producing the outcomes we want for kids. But I think many administrators and teachers are scratching their heads, but what do we change about it? How do we change our day-to-day activities? How do we change our schedules, our staffing, the way we fund our schools in a way that really grounds students in opportunities that are preparing them for their future success?
What may be missing sometimes is the important role that database problem solving can play on an ongoing basis, and looking at the research that supports that when those pieces of structured problem solving are in place, that we're in a better position to identify what's working for them, what adjustments need to be made. Looking at patterns, certainly high school students who have attendance issues that probably didn't start in high school necessarily. So looking at behavior patterns, attendance patterns, supporting mental health, and really that whole student approach, and making sure that all of those systems and those supports are integrated. And when I think of student systems of support, anything that we're doing from a preventive or intervention standpoint would really fall under that umbrella.
I think that our conversations are very sterile. They can be quantitatively based. So we're looking at the data, we're looking at reading scores, we're looking at attendance, we're looking at behavior, drilling down far enough to really be able to shape things and impact things the most meaningfully for students so that they're successful.
I love early warning systems, student success systems. I see that as almost like your temperature gauge in a car or your health and wellness check. It provides the data to tell you how's the system functioning. It will shed some light on whether we're talking about individual student challenges, groups of students, or even systemic issues that should be addressed within a multi-tiered framework, whether we're talking about social, emotional, academic, behavioral, and that your student success systems don't necessarily tell you what to do, but can point you in the right direction of who needs support or what's not necessarily working, and then allows you a mechanism to track progress and see, after we're putting supports in place, are we seeing improvements? Are we seeing growth, not only at the individual student level, but also at the systems level, and really making sure that we're thinking about Tier 1 consistently, as well as Tier 2 and Tier 3.
Transition and timeline.
And I think the challenge is not everybody has an active process in place. Some school districts start very late. They don't monitor grades as early as they should. Other school systems make sure that they have those early warning signs and their systems in place within their schools to be able to monitor students, their grades, their attendance, and their behavior. And without those kinds of things in place, then we lose the students, we lose their positive mindset and their ability to recover in terms of making sure that they understand how important it is for them to benefit from the resources that are available to them, as well as making sure that they can really problem solve and go to the right resources, and that mom and dad are on board, and that we also have an opportunity for people to be able to exchange ideas with not only their parents but with them, so that we can see a brighter future. You know, the federal law says around age 13 that we should be looking at transition plans. But the truth of the matter is, I think it's important for us to look at transition from elementary to middle, and then from middle to high. I think it's imperative that we look at the data, the critical data, not only just at third grade, but maybe at second grade, because we know what third grade increments are in many of our school systems with higher standards, and making sure that those are cut points for whether we move on or not. But when we look at those, there's reasons that we have students that are either identified or need to be identified, and that get caught up in ineffective transition. So I think it's really important that we're talking about when students need that extra support to transition more effectively, and that communication and plan for a future starts early with parents, minimally by middle school, so that we can ensure that those foundations are in place, those resources are in place, and that there's tracking and monitoring to be able to project where that student can be, and that we can make sure that that road path is effective for them as they enter high school and move forward.
Missed or over-identification.
I think one challenge is, or one barrier is, misidentifying some kids from the outset, or over-identifying some kids or populations. I think some evaluation and identification practices maybe aren't as effective as they could be in identifying the right students.
I think a lot of the things that we're hearing and seeing are related to ensuring that students are receiving the right supports at the right time. And one of the challenges that we see a lot is once students have been identified, they might actually receive less services and supports than they may have otherwise, as if their district and school had a really robust multi-tiered system of support. So really it comes back to ensuring that students are actually receiving interventions, supports, services that are matched to the intensity of the need consistently.
Trusted relationships.
It's about making sure we've got adequate supports in place, and it's about consistency. So when we look at a student with a disability, we look at them as a whole person. And the sooner we can start that communication process with them, the better off we are.
And so having systems in place where we're collecting ongoing information, monitoring how these students are doing, and then we have someone who is directly connected to the students, even if that's a custodian in the building, it could be a teacher that hasn't had that student for class. A direct contact can really provide the engagement that's needed for that student to feel welcomed and to come to school, which are a couple of the next steps to moving them towards graduation.
Without shifting mindsets, parties cannot develop the knowledge and skills required to change the system that supports students on their path to success. By focusing attention on these key themes, mindsets, knowledge, and systems, and the qualities that make these themes successful, we can work together to ensure that students have the support they need to graduate high school and become successful adults. Follow the conversation and learn more about the Grad Partnership at gradpartnership.org.